from this first. Hello, welcome everyone to the second webinar of the GlobalABC webinar series on NDCs, how to incorporate fundable building sector actions in NDCs, Latin America. My name is Ju, and I work here with the GlobalABC Secretariat, and I'm joined here by the head of the cities unit at UN Environment, Martina also. Before passing the microphone over to her, I would just apologies. I would just like to invite everyone to send their questions through GoToWebinar. If you look at your screen, you have a little button, and you can type your questions, and during the Q&A session, we'll read through them and ask them to our speakers. Okay, over to you, Martina.
Okay, thanks very much, Ju, and very warm welcome to everybody in this virtual room. Welcome to this webinar on how to incorporate buildings in NDCs in the Latin American and Caribbean region. As Ju said, this is a part of a larger webinar series run by the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction on key themes of importance in moving the buildings and construction sector towards a sustainable pathway. One word about who we are. The Global Alliance for Building and Construction is the leading global platform for governments, private sector, civil society, and international and intergovernmental organizations to get together to increase action towards zero-emission, efficient, and resilient buildings and construction. We have over 120 members with 28 being countries, and we've been founded at COP21. We do have two main objectives. The first is about raising the level of ambition to meet the Paris goals in this key sector, and to mobilize all actors along the value chain, recognizing that it is a complicated sector because it's very fragmented as well. We do have a number of flagship products that I'd like to highlight briefly as well. On the next slide. Exactly, and that's our global status report, which comes out annually and helps us to track progress in the sector. It gives a lot of examples as well, highlights key topics that have come out, and gives the trends of what has happened. We do have a global roadmap that has been developed as well with key steps. It outlines key steps, how to get towards the vision that we have set for ourselves. And this is now being regionalized, and the Latin American and Caribbean region is sort of the first one to really concentrate on. And we did already have two meetings, one linked to the Ministerial Forum of Environment Ministers, where we got a political recognition of this process, and we had a number of key stakeholders of the region brought together, and another meeting in Costa Rica linked to the World Green Building Council, for bringing in more private sector contributions. I should note here as well that the Argentinian government is extremely supportive of that, and organized another regional meeting as well that took the issue from a national perspective. We also have, and that's the subject of today, this NDC guide on the table. And I don't think I have to say much to you about why the sector is so important. 40% of global energy-related GHG emissions. With the projections of urbanization and the increase in built surface area, we will see this being on the rise if we don't take drastic action. Now, the NDCs, and why is it that we focus on this topic? The NDCs to date do have some reference to buildings. 136 parties have actually put forward something that covers the sector in one way or the other, but very few feature specific targets or very specific measures. And in addition, if they were fully implemented, they would only cover about 60% of the buildings related GHG emissions. So that shows us why we really need to help step up as we go to the review of the NDCs next year. And I think I'll leave it at that with the introduction. but it sets out the lay of the land. We have a wonderful lineup of contributors to our webinar, and that ranges from the NDC partnership, so we'll hear a little more about this partnership and what they offer in terms of support. We will hear about this NDC guide in more depth, what is in it, and we will have case studies from the region. We will set aside some time for questions and answers, and you already mentioned how you get in touch with us so that we make sure that you can pose your questions. And we would like to ask you to every time spell out at the outset who you would like to address the question to. So with that, this is the agenda, but I just outlined that as well. I would like to give the floor to Estefania Ardia, the country engagement consultant at the NDC partnership, to tell us a little bit more about this wonderful initiative. Estefania.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the participants of this webinar and to ABC for this kind of invitation. My presentation is going to be very short, but first of all, I want to ask you whether the language preference, I don't know if you prefer me to speak in Spanish or in English.
From our side, that's fine. Depends on the participants, but maybe Spanish is good. Sorry, my Spanish is.
That's.
I wouldn't have wanted to do it. I wouldn't have wanted to put that on to you, but I'm probably the only one who has a problem. But I understand well, so, and I'm not the main point.
Okay, fantastic. Then I'm switching to Spanish. Bueno,
okay.
Muchas gracias a todos, y para iniciar, pues me gustaría hablar un poco sobre el NDC Partnership y cómo esta iniciativa puede tener relación con las actividades, con lo que se está haciendo en materia de construcción sostenible, eficiencia energética en las construcciones alrededor del mundo. El NDC Partnership es una alianza, es una coalición de países, ya son casi 100 instituciones implementadoras de desarrollo, organizaciones de la cooperación internacional, miembros asociados, dentro de los cuales están centros de pensamiento, organizaciones de la sociedad civil, y todos ellos tenemos en común un propósito, que es ayudar a acelerar la implementación de las contribuciones nacionales determinadas por los países en materia de cambio climático. Esa es, digamos, el sentido y la razón de ser. Siguiente, por favor. Esencialmente, nosotros, yo hago parte del secretariado del NDC Partnership, que es una unidad de apoyo, la unidad de apoyo del NDC Partnership, y esencialmente nosotros nos dedicamos, o el NDC Partnership se dedica a tres cosas, o tiene tres, digamos, formas de trabajar con los países. Primero, ayudándolos a identificar a través de una estrategia de país para aquellos que lo necesiten, las necesidades para implementar sus contribuciones nacionales, y ayudándolos sobre todo a coordinar, a tener una coordinación más efectiva, más rápida, más significativa con los donantes y con los socios de implementación del NDC Partnership. También tenemos apoyo en materia de conocimiento y aprendizaje, entonces podemos ayudar a un país. Es posible que haya países que solo están interesados en trabajar en eso, entonces tenemos esa flexibilidad. Darles las herramientas de suministrar y facilitar los recursos que se necesiten para promover cosas como intercambios de conocimiento, desarrollo de casos de estudio y cualquier otro mecanismo enfocado en mejorar, fortalecer y diseminar conocimientos en materia de las contribuciones nacionales y de cambio climático. Y hay un área de trabajo que también implementamos que tiene que ver más con la financiación directa, con ayudar a canalizar la financiación directa a países que ya, digamos, están avanzados en sus temas de coordinación y necesitan flujos financieros para implementar medidas, proyectos, programas que ya tienen identificados. Entonces, ese es, digamos, otros de los enfoques o de las áreas en las que está centrado el NDC Partnership. Siguiente, por favor. Quiero dar un ejemplo para, digamos, puntualizar y que ustedes tengan más claro de qué se trata todo este trabajo, sobre cómo podría haber un link en los temas que ustedes manejan, desde las instituciones en las que ustedes trabajan y el tipo de apoyo que ayuda a canalizar el NDC Partnership. Cuando hablamos de estrategia de país, como les dije, hablamos de ayudar a los países a identificar y a coordinar apoyos para implementar sus NDC en las áreas que se determinen prioritarias. Esto es solo uno de los muchos ejemplos que hay en el mundo de apoyos que hemos ayudado a movilizar. Este es un caso en Colombia, una iniciativa del Reino Unido llamada PACT, que se gestó, se coordinó muy fuertemente en su diseño y desde sus inicios con nosotros en el NDC Partnership, de modo tal que el programa en sus áreas de trabajo y en sus áreas o prioridades de financiación respondiera verdaderamente a las necesidades del país. En este programa PACT se están apoyando muchas áreas de trabajo, pero dentro de ellas quería traer a colación el tema de eficiencia energética y de energías renovables. Uno de los proyectos, de los 7 proyectos que se escogió en la primera fase para financiar, es el desarrollo de un mecanismo para permitir que un instrumento financiero para las energías renovables y la eficiencia energética del gobierno de Colombia pueda hacer un gasto, digámoslo así, una inversión fluida, efectiva de los recursos que están allí, es decir, eliminar las barreras, digamos, regulatorias que no han permitido que esos fondos se utilicen tan eficientemente como se quisiera. Entonces, digamos que son programas y proyectos muy dirigidos que pueden tener una envergadura más amplia, y este es uno de los tantos que uno esperaría que más adelante resultaran mejoras y en beneficios y en financiación directa también para aquellas empresas de la industria y también del sector construcción que estén interesadas en implementar mejores estándares. Siguiente, por favor. Esto es un ejemplo, o más bien una captura de pantalla de algunas de las herramientas que ofrecemos en nuestra página del NDC Partnership. Tenemos un portal de conocimiento, esto hace parte de nuestra área de trabajo de conocimiento. Una de las cosas que me pareció interesante mostrarles en esta presentación es la base de datos de buenas prácticas. Entonces, hay filtros en donde se puede ver por temas, por sectores, por organizaciones, qué existe, qué casos de estudio, qué literatura existe también por regiones y por países. Entonces, justamente en esta captura de pantalla, pues vemos ejemplos de México, de Perú, de Argentina. Entonces, pues, en última son cosas pues relevantes para quienes están en la práctica todos los días y para la región. Siguiente, por favor. Para finalizar mi presentación, quería hablarles de una iniciativa que está en marcha justo ahora y que puede ser pues de interés de los asistentes al webinar, especialmente de los que forman parte de los gobiernos. El NDC Partnership, entre sus socios, lanzó una iniciativa llamada CAEP o CAP. El objetivo de esa iniciativa es, digamos, un programa de rápida activación y de rápido acceso a recursos para actualizar y fortalecer las contribuciones determinadas a nivel nacional. Tiene 2 grandes objetivos o líneas de trabajo. El primero es ayudar a fortalecer las contribuciones nacionales a la luz del compromiso que tienen los países de actualizar y mejorar esas NDC a 2020. Y hay un segundo objetivo que está más asociado a tener recursos para implementar de manera rápida y directa los compromisos, las medidas y todo lo que está previsto dentro de esas contribuciones nacionales. ¿Cómo funciona el programa? A través de 2, digamos, bolsas de recursos. La primera está en el pool de las organizaciones que forman parte del NDC Partnership. Entonces va a haber apoyo que viene directamente de las agencias implementadoras, de los donantes que quieren apoyar a los países que presentan una solicitud al CAP, y un fondo de asistencia técnica del cual se van a proporcionar recursos adicionales a los de esos miembros y esas contrapartes en caso de que sean necesarios para cubrir las necesidades que los países están solicitando pues bajo esta iniciativa, bajo este programa. Siguiente, por favor. Estas son las fechas clave de la primera ronda de este programa CAP, es importante aclarar que no tenemos, digamos, un monto definido a priori o un tope máximo de recursos que se puedan solicitar, precisamente pues porque vamos a revisar dentro de un grupo muy grande de organizaciones quienes pueden prestar apoyo a las necesidades que dice el país en los montos en los que el país indica. El día de hoy precisamente es el cierre de la primera ronda de aplicaciones en línea. Hemos recibido interés y tenemos a más de un par de decenas de países con una aplicación ya en el sistema, pero para quienes estén interesados en seguir participando, en tener acceso a estos recursos, va a haber una segunda ronda que va a empezar en octubre y posiblemente va a haber una tercera ronda si hay recursos disponibles. El proceso es rápido, relativamente, se revisan las propuestas, luego las circulamos con los socios interinstitucionales del NDC Partnership y posteriormente damos una respuesta consolidada a los países sobre de qué manera vamos a atender esas necesidades que ellos pusieron sobre la mesa y en donde, por supuesto, cabe las iniciativas, programas, proyectos que tengan que ver con construcción, eficiencia energética y demás, en tanto que son una parte fundamental de las NDCs, sobre todo en la región. Siguiente. Entonces, bueno, esto es el final de la presentación. Simplemente acá dejamos los datos de contacto de las redes para que tengan presente que ahí estamos. Toda la información de CAP y de toda la forma en la que nos involucramos con los países está en nuestra página web. Entonces, pues muy cordialmente los invito a visitarla y agradezco muchísimo su atención. Las preguntas son bienvenidas también a mi correo electrónico. Entonces, muchas gracias.
Thanks very much, Stefania. I suggest that we will go on to the next presentation and then have a short time for questions and answers. So first we got this good overview of well, the partnership that can help, that can provide support for the NDC process in countries. And now we focus a little more on the building sector with Peter, who will be presenting the guide to incorporating buildings actions in NDCs. Peter Graham is the director of PAN Solutions, and he's the executive director of Global Buildings Performance Network, and he is the main author of the guide. Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Martina, and thank you, everybody. I'll be speaking in English for this presentation. I'm not sure whether I have control over the slides, Martina, but I'll just ask to have them advanced. So the next slide, please. So, yeah, there we go. Great. So the NDC guide is intended to assist countries in increasing the ambition of building sector actions in their NDCs, or in fact helping to draft actions that would be good to include in NDCs. It responds to our observation that really the current commitments in NDCs are insufficient to meet Paris Agreement goals, and that despite there being 136 countries that have referenced the building sector in their NDCs, the current commitments only cover about 60% of building-related greenhouse gas emissions. So, noting that there is a need for increased ambition, we set about to identify what were the main concerns for governments in actually engaging with the building sector, and then drafting actions which could be fundable in an NDC environment. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is animated. So if we just click there you go. Thank you. So the guide was created based on a series of surveys which were conducted with countries that had included building sector actions in their NDCs and who had otherwise developed some significant national programs focused on building sectors such as NAMAs. We asked countries to note any plans they had to increase the ambition of sector commitments and what the main roadblocks were. And what we found was that really there are three ways in which building sector could be better engaged, and the NDC's ambitions could be increased. So one was in increasing the scope of coverage of building sector actions. So that includes activities to increase the range of coverage of building codes, for example, from commercial buildings to residential buildings, and then through to precinct or neighbourhood or municipal scale low carbon developments. Then increasing performance, so that would include aspirations for achieving net zero energy performance for different building types, or net zero carbon, looking at life cycle aspects. And then finally, integration and adaptation. So we also, as part of separate work, looked at the national adaptation plans, and there's quite a number which include actions in the building sector. And so there's a need to look at how we integrate adaptation with mitigation, but also integrating municipal and subnational building sector actions with national goals. Thanks. Next slide, please. So we looked at what were the actions that were being included in NDCs and which ones would perhaps provide an opportunity for increased mitigation coverage. What we found was that really the types of actions being included are mainly to do with policy. So this is the global status now. So policies including building energy codes, policies for incorporating energy efficiency labeling and standards for appliances, but also for building energy in use. So this includes things like energy rating for existing building and renovations and so on. The least prevalent was really design-oriented actions, and this is quite surprising because policies take a long time to implement, but design is really at the forefront of innovation, and so we would expect there to be quite a lot of opportunities in looking at new and innovative designs for buildings, and also indeed new construction technologies and the promise of digitization. So the policy focus when looking at policies was really looking at developing codes for new buildings, but there's obviously a lot of work to be done in improving the energy performance of existing buildings and incorporating renewables. When we look at performance of buildings, energy was really the main focus, especially energy efficiency, but we do know from looking at the building life cycle that embodied energy is also very important and has got more immediate mitigation potential, and that we should also be looking at the levels of performance. Many of the performance levels being called up in the actions are really relative to fairly low performing benchmarks. So really need to be shifting towards absolute goals for net zero energy in the future. And then finally, the other observation is that really the main jurisdiction which is calling for actions in the building sector are municipalities or cities. And this really creates an opportunity for countries because many of the city commitments are more ambitious than the national commitments are. So looking at vertical integration and how we can connect municipal, subnational and then national actions together so that we can see economies of scale, but also much more effective and high ambition outcomes. Next slide, please. So when we look more closely at this region, we can see that there are certainly quite a lot of engagement in building sector actions in the region. Some countries have included building sector in their NDCs already, and some of the larger economies have got significant nationwide initiatives aimed at climate mitigation in the building sector. And obviously you'll get some case studies on this webinar as well from some of those countries. But what we see when we look at the kinds of actions being incorporated into NDCs is a big emphasis on technologies. So improving lighting technologies, cooking technologies and heating and cooling technologies really predominant. And then after that, looking at improvements of energy efficiency performance. So this includes things like labelling schemes, improving building envelope efficiencies and window efficiencies. Quite a lot less emphasis on policy development and less on incorporation of renewables, but where they do exist, the policies are focused on building energy efficiency, and renewables, really solar thermal is the main concern. Next slide, please. So how do we get all of this, these ideas into an NDC and in a way which is ambitious enough to be attractive for significant funding? So this is really what the purpose of the guide is, to try and break down some simple guidelines for being able to develop effective and fundable building sector actions, and also mindful that this is a guide that we hope is useful in the process, the formal process of updating NDCs. Next slide, please. So the guide works is structured around 3 linked activities, and it has 3 basic how-tos. So the first how-to is how to determine the scope of actions and building industry sectors that should be included in order to achieve the mitigation adaptation goals of your country. And this starts with a mapping process. Second is how to prioritise the mitigation goals and actions based on funding criteria that are being applied by multilateral donors and investors. And the third is how to implement the actions through good governance, accessing and reporting on finance, capacity building, and finding technical assistance. And importantly, how to engage the right stakeholders through this cycle. Next slide, please. So in the guide, you'll find more detailed information and also examples on how to develop the right kind of MRV baselines for the sector, how to map existing policies and capabilities to identify opportunities and gaps, and how to develop local market action plans. The key word there is really local. We find, as I said before, that cities are very much involved in building sector actions, but the building sector in general is operating with a series of linked local markets. So it's important to look at activities that meet or are adaptable to local market conditions within a country. So having mapped, we then prioritize, and really what we're looking at here is prioritizing actions which have a high mitigation potential, are linked to adaptation impacts, that are transformative and scalable, so not just one-off demonstration projects, that are very much connected to stakeholders and reflect stakeholder engagement, and that are leading to measurable, reportable, and verifiable outcomes. So with that, then we then move into the implementation, and there's a range of different criteria that you can follow for guidance on good governance and also financing the implementation process. Yes, next slide, thank you. Within the guide, you'll also find a number of examples from countries around the world, and then more deep dive profiles onto what's going on in the countries that you can see on the screen there. There are also links to resources offered by GlobalABC members across the range of different actions that you can see in the guide, the mapping, the planning, and the implementation. Next slide, please. What we're working on now are translations. We have yet to produce a Spanish translation. We do have a version in Mandarin ready for the Secretariat to take over. We're doing the webinars now to introduce the guide to more countries, and we're developing some further case studies looking at vertical integration. That process is ongoing, and so if you do have some information you'd like to share as a case study, please do contact me and get involved in the next steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. If there's any questions, this is the time. So far, we haven't gotten any. So if you have something, please shoot right now. Obviously, there's an opportunity to raise questions at the end of the session as well. But I understand that Stefania will have to leave for another commitment a little bit earlier. So any questions to her would have to be right now. While you're being given that opportunity, I would like to introduce already our speakers for the next section, which is the country studies. We have 4 country case studies lined up. The first is Argentina. Here we have Prem Salzman, the Director of Innovation for Sustainable Development of the Secretariat of the Government of Environment and Sustainable Development. And he has experience as well, I mean, across the government, having worked beforehand with the Ministry of Education on green schools, and also with the Environmental Protection Agency. With that, Prem, over to you to talk us through the experience in Argentina and particularly the climate change action plans and the link to energy and industry. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you, Martina. Thank you, Peter and Joe, for everything. Well, I will go to Spanish. Agradezco a todos los que están participando del webinar. La realidad es que la temática de vivienda y construcción sustentable en Argentina se ha convertido hoy en día en una política de Estado que ha tomado una gran relevancia, siendo que este gobierno, con el presidente Macri al frente, ha decidido que en términos de fortalecer el compromiso en materia de cambio climático, se tendrían que hacer acciones que redunden en mejoras cualitativas de las viviendas existentes y cuantitativas en las viviendas por construir, y eso obviamente se traduce en los compromisos argentinos en términos de reducción de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero. Si podemos pasar a la siguiente filmina. En términos de la NDC, Argentina presentó un compromiso de no superar las 483 millones de toneladas de dióxido de carbono para 2030, en su NDC. ¿Podemos seguir? La siguiente. Y dentro de este compromiso, en base al inventario de gases de efecto invernadero, se determinó que el 15% de las emisiones se asocian al sector residencial. Esto significa que, o demuestra la gran relevancia que tiene el hecho de implementar acciones que permitan reducir las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero en este sector. Podemos seguir. En términos del cómo reducir y cómo se estructuró el plan de trabajo en Argentina, en 2016 se creó el Gabinete Nacional de Cambio Climático para que el cumplimiento de la NDC se haga de una manera bottom-up, es decir, que para llegar al cumplimiento del target de no exceder los 483 millones de toneladas de dióxido de carbono equivalente, se trabaja se creó desde Jefatura de Gabinete de Ministros, a cargo directamente bajo la órbita del presidente Macri, el Gabinete Nacional de Cambio Climático, y se le encomendó a la Secretaría de Gobierno, Ambiente y Desarrollo Sustentable la coordinación y el manejo interinstitucional para que los distintos organismos nacionales sean protagonistas en el desarrollo de distintos planes sectoriales, los cuales gran parte de ellos incluyen aspectos vinculados al sector de las edificaciones y la construcción, como es el caso de energía, industria e infraestructura. Lo que es muy interesante es que, trabajando con los planes sectoriales, Argentina está yendo hacia el cumplimiento de la NDC por el hecho de que no es que la Secretaría de Ambiente simplemente reporta, sino que se va haciendo un trabajo articulado con los distintos organismos, y son los organismos nacionales, provinciales y también organizaciones de la sociedad civil que velan y responden también por el cumplimiento de estos compromisos. Entonces, hay un trabajo articulado y la realidad para comentarles y también abrirles nuestra experiencia es que el Gabinete Nacional de Cambio Climático hace una experiencia y es una experiencia muy exitosa y una herramienta de involucramiento que no solo vela por fortalecer la NDC presentada por Argentina, sino también por lograr poner en un mainstream, lograr poner en un escenario principal el eje temático de cambio climático y reducción de emisiones de efecto invernadero. Podemos seguir a la siguiente, como veíamos en las filminas previas, en el 2016 se crea el Gabinete Nacional de Cambio Climático y ya se han presentado distintos planes sectoriales, como es el caso de energía, transporte, industria y bosque, siendo que en el corto plazo se va a estar presentando el sector del agro y de infraestructura. Como lo comentaba, el sector de las edificaciones y la construcción no está exclusivamente integrado en un plan sectorial, sino que es un enfoque transversal en donde hasta el momento se ha trabajado en el plan de acción de energía, de industria y de infraestructura que está pronto a publicarse. Podemos seguir una filmina más. Vamos a poder observar que en cuanto a los planes del plan de acción vinculado a energía, hay distintas medidas asociadas al sector de las edificaciones y la construcción, como es la mejora en la envolvente que se contempla para que hoy en día todas las viviendas sociales construidas con fondos del Estado pasaron de una normativa IRAM, que es el organismo de certificación nacional C, a un organismo B. Esto redunda en una mejor aislación de la vivienda y también en el uso de materiales innovadores que se vincula con el plan de acción de industria en lo que refiere a la utilización de materiales alternativos que reducen acero, agua y consumo de energía en la construcción. Dicho de otra manera, se ha considerado dentro de lo que es la construcción de viviendas sociales como tecnologías tradicionales el steel frame y el entramado de madera. ¿Esto qué implica? Implica que cualquier privado que quiera construir viviendas sociales con esta tecnología ya no tiene que tener el certificado de aptitud técnica, que es una serie que requiere la realización de una serie de ensayos bastante complejos, sino que se lo considera ya tecnología validada. De esta manera se integra a lo que es la construcción tradicional con ladrillos, estas tecnologías más industrializadas, y se considera que desde el punto de vista del uso, es decir, desde el punto de vista de la energía, se puede reducir, se puede llegar a incidir a casi 6 millones de viviendas con una reducción de 1.2 millones de toneladas de dióxido de carbono, y en cuanto al aspecto industrial, 12 millones de metros cuadrados de área construida, lo que equivale a aproximadamente 0,4 millones de toneladas de dióxido de carbono equivalente. Podemos seguir, y en la filmina siguiente vamos a observar lo que se está desarrollando en la actualidad con el Plan de Acción de Infraestructura y Tierra. En este sentido se está trabajando, como venimos manifestando en las distintas reuniones que tenemos la suerte de participar en la GlobalABC. Desde ya les agradecemos el espacio que nos dan desde Argentina para poder exponer las políticas que estamos desarrollando. En este contexto, en el plan de infraestructura, identificamos distintas medidas de mitigación y adaptación producto de las políticas de Estado que están desarrollando. En este sentido, hoy en día hay en curso una prueba piloto para lo que es el retrofit en viviendas precarias. Esto es que hoy en día ya hay una prueba piloto en la ciudad de Bariloche para que viviendas de bajos recursos puedan tener un acceso a un retrofit a cargo del Estado. Esto está dando muy buenos resultados y de hecho se quiere exceder para que no sea solo viviendas precarias, sino también a viviendas sociales y que no sea solo en Bariloche, sino ya se está trabajando para que se implemente en la provincia de Buenos Aires, que es la provincia más poblada de la Argentina. Para lo que refiere a los planes sectoriales, se contempla la implementación ya de este proyecto de retrofit en todo el país. Complementariamente, creemos que no solo hay que trabajar en aspectos cualitativos, por lo cual podemos pasar a la siguiente, no hay problema. En lo que refiere, entendemos que no solo hay que trabajar en aspectos cualitativos, sino también hay que trabajar en aspectos cuantitativos. Si podemos pasar a la siguiente filmina se va a ver más claramente. Entonces, en ese sentido, estamos desarrollando lo que es el proyecto GEF de viviendas sociales de energía, eficiencia energética y energías renovables en la vivienda social argentina. Esto es muy significativo porque se está desarrollando 24 prototipos distintos de viviendas sociales con criterios de sustentabilidad en las 6 zonas bioambientales del país. Esto nos va a dar y se va a hacer una medición por un año. Eso nos va a dar como resultado cuáles de las medidas han resultado más costo efectivas de ser implementadas en términos de consumo energético y reducción de emisiones, y se va a fortalecer lo que yo les comentaba, que eran los aspectos normativos. Entendemos que también todo este proceso hay que acompañarlo con un alto involucramiento y fortalecimiento de lo que son las capacidades técnicas de los profesionales y estudiantes de Argentina, pero también la sensibilización de la población en general, por lo cual se está trabajando activamente en estas dos áreas, procesos de capacitación para profesionales y procesos de sensibilización desde un punto de vista del abordaje social. Por otro lado, también se va a trabajar en la inclusión de estándares de sustentabilidad en vivienda promocionada, lo que es el plan Procrear, y se está trabajando en lo que es el etiquetado de eficiencia energética en 3 provincias y se considera que se va a poder implementar en todo el país. Lo que es muy interesante es que no conformes con esto, estamos trabajando en articulación con la Secretaría de Vivienda para que podamos incluir más medidas producto del trabajo proactivo que estamos desarrollando, y esto se expresa en distintas acciones, como lo puede ser la creación de un sello de viviendas sustentables que va a integrar este etiquetado o esta certificación que yo comentaba de eficiencia energética como uno de los puntos, pero entendemos que tiene que integrarse otros aspectos, como puede ser un enfoque de ciclo de vida, que es un trabajo que estamos haciendo con el CONICET, que es un consejo científico especializado para que esta metodología pueda implementarse de manera más masiva. Y por último, un poquito reforzando lo que yo les comentaba recién, el trabajo de seguir fomentando la industrialización de los materiales constructivos que van a implementarse en las viviendas sociales, también para responder ante posibles emergencias en respuesta y en el marco del Plan Nacional de Adaptación frente al Cambio Climático. Eso es todo desde mi intervención. Espero que haya sido claro, y si quedó alguna consulta, desde ya quedó a entera disposición. Muchas gracias. Y hago una aclaración que Diego no participó porque decidimos que en este poquito plazo era más sencillo que presente yo todo, pero está aquí conmigo por cualquier cosa.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prem, for the rich presentation, laying out the different ways you're getting at the building sector with the different sectoral plans. I think that was very interesting, as well as the approach taken with regard to life cycle and the focus on materials, as well as social housing, and then the vertical integration. So I think there's a couple of things that I guess as well we'll see coming back in some of the other case studies, and that leads me over to the next one. We move to Costa Rica. We will have Katia Aguiar from the Directorate of Climate Change, the Ministry of Environment and Energy, speaking to us about the experience in Costa Rica. And here, similarly, it will be an introduction of the climate action policy, as well as requirements for sustainable buildings in the tropics with a focus on materials and resources. Katja has a strong chemicals background and is in the ministry in charge of the coordination with other institutions for the execution of actions on climate change, specifically the axis of mitigation of national climate action strategy. The floor is yours.
Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thanks a lot for the invitation to this webinar. I'm going to present the experience in Costa Rica incorporating the fundable building sector actions in the national determined contributions. The next one. To begin with, I'd like to explain or tell you about the numbers of how much climate change costs us. For example, we have 1,130 million losses due to losses to extreme hydrometeorological events from 2005 to 2011. Also, that means that it is 188 million per year, $188 million per year, and also 0.5 of the 2011 GDP. We have a timeline of climate action policies. First of all, we have a forestry law, the number 7575, that promotes power generation with renewable resources. Also, we have the Paris Agreement ratification on 2016. On 2018, we have a National Development Plan from 2015 to 2018. We expect to have our climate carbon neutrality for 2021. And also most of the actions of our national climate change strategy and its action plan for that year. Also, we have a national energy plan, a risk management policy plan for 2030, and NDC goals for also the SDGs. For 2050, we have an economy decarbonization. In our INDCs, the mitigation contribution reaffirms the aspiration to orient its economy towards carbon neutrality by 2021 as part of the pre-2020 voluntary actions. That means that we expect to have around 9.3 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions by 2030. The trajectory expects to have 1.73 tons per capita at 2030, then lower that to 1.19 tons per capita for 2050, and then minus 0.27 tons per capita at 2100. These limits is consistent to our trajectory to meet the 2 degrees target. Next one. In our INDCs, we include different actions such as waste reduction in the construction cycle, increased use of wood, adopt of climate smart technologies, materials and operating system combined with sustainable urban development measures that can generate a significant emission reduction. In order to accomplish that, the following, please. We have our decarbonization plan, which has in its Act 5, number 5, the sustainable and low emission buildings. So over there, you will have the planning regarding those low emission buildings. The different commitments that we have from 2011 to 2022 are that we expect around 20 new buildings with voluntary environmental standards. Those standards include LEED, EDGE, RESET, that it's a tropical one, and also we expect to have 20 existing buildings implementing at least one action to reduce emissions. Those are the commitments that we expect between those years. In the long term, we expect, for example, for 2025, an increase of 10% in the use of wood, bamboo, and other local materials in buildings. For 2030, 100% of buildings are designed and built adopting bioclimatic system. And for 2050, that is the limit of our planet, of this specific plan is 50% of commercial and residential and institutional buildings operating with low emission standards. That means with high electrification or use of renewable energy in cooking processes and water heating. Okay, that's the slide I just explained for the long term. Just to let you know, because most of the standards are pretty recognized globally, the LEED, EDGE, but these requirements for sustainable buildings in the tropic is a specific standard that we have in Costa Rica, which have 7 chapters. Socioeconomic aspects with 11 requirements, environment and transportation with 25 requirements, space quality and well-being with 27 requirements, soils and landscaping with 19 requirements, materials and resources with around 15 requirements, efficient water use with 15 requirements, and energy optimization. So those are the different things that we evaluate in this specific standard. I'm going to talk about, because due to time restrictions, of some of the requirements included in this standard. Space quality and well-being, for example, looks to generate intermediate interior exterior spaces that cushion the inclement weather, which serve to achieve a comfortable interior penumbra. Incorporating also facade elements, roof or eave roofs with vegetation or water, and serve to mitigate effects of the sun, heat, wind, noise, pollution, and humidity. You can get to look an example in the picture over there. For soils and landscaping, we look to reduce or prevent earthworks and leveling and intervention of natural terrain, adapt the buildings to the existing vegetation, and preserve the visual scene of the natural landscape, control erosion and sedimentation of soils, and also reduce that soil. For the materials and resources, we seek to use construction materials and products extracted, harvested, and or manufactured in the country. Also use materials that have some kind of certification, and incorporate materials of plant origin from renewable resources of short replacement cycles, around 25 years. Then here are some numbers that our National Forest Office prepared with information of SAY-Boys. We have that for every cubic meter of wood, a tree produces an equivalent of 0.7 tons of oxygen. And for every cubic meter of wood, a tree absorbs 1 ton of CO2. Obviously, this depends on different parameters that a more detailed calculation will ask for the species of the tree and the height, the amount or the diameter of it. So this is an approximate number, but just to let you know the benefits to replace some of the building materials with wood, I can tell you that the CO2 will remain stored in timber products for up to 75 years. And each cubic meter of wood used as substitute for other construction materials reduces CO2 emissions to the atmosphere by about 1.1 tons. So each cubic meter of wood saves a total of 2.1 tons of CO2. Oops. So an average room house of 120 square meters for middle class occupies an average of 8-10 doors, that could be wood doors, without considering the frames, moldings, and closets. And well, each cubic meter of wood saves a total of these 2.1 tons. So it's a way to explain why it's important to increase the use of wood, and that's one of the reasons that we seek for that substitution, the 10% I explained before, on our decarbonization plan. So that will be my presentation. Well, I'm sorry, I forgot one slide. Well, basically, the annual amount of greenhouse gases to be reduced between 2012 and 2030 corresponds to 170,000 around of CO2 equivalent. So the replacement of 5% of the purchases of materials with a higher carbon footprint by national wood and its derivatives by public institutions in items related to buildings, facilities, building maintenance, furniture, will entail the reduction of around 101,000 tons of CO2. That means that Costa Rica, if we accomplish that, could reach around 60% of the total annual emission reductions. Actually, by the Environmental Day on June, we have a specific decree for sustainable constructions in institutions. So many of the requirements of the reset standard were applied to our public institutions as mandatory requirements. That's the information that executive decree includes. So now I finish my presentation. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katia. And that was very interesting to hear that strong focus on materials, and particularly a collaboration as well between ministries to get to this point, so between forestry and your end. So thank you very much. We move with that to Mexico. We have Gabriela Tapia Padilla, the Deputy Director General for Renewable Energies at CNR. And I think we will have Roberto René stepping in for her or doing the presentation with her. But over to you.
Hi, this is Gabriela. I'm back.
Hi, Gabriela.
Yes.
We've put on the slides. If you'd like to give it a start.
Yes, so we will talk about the incorporation of building sector actions in nationally determined in Mexico. Mexico government has already goals target about greenhouses gases emission. Our goal is to achieve 22% of greenhouse gas emissions reduction by the year of 2030. And this value is considering a tendency scenario without climate change actions as a reference. That means that they take as a baseline. And we have another goal that is about the general climate change law. And this establish a mitigation reduction target by 30% in 2020, 50% in 2050, and so on. The construction sector actions in Mexico is basically promoting the building construction and transformation to sustainable and energy efficient low carbon cities. And for this, we have adopted certain energy efficiency measures in buildings. For example, modification of habits or best practice, lighting, insulation of the buildings, and exchange of technologies like fridge, etc. Next. Well, the next question is why it's important to incorporate building actions in NDCs. Well, according to our consumption, the residential and commercial apportation to the climate change mitigation will be a reduction of 80% if we adopt these strategies. Yes. The actions that have been taken by the government of Mexico are several. Here we present some of the different things that they have been done. For example, we have norms or laws that have been applied, the regulation framework for efficiency program in the federal public administration. That means that there have been some changes for the construction and buildings for the public facilities. Next. Well, this has been also implemented for not only public facilities, but also for residential houses. And the government provides subsidy to homes that are within the urban containment and perimeters, and they have technology for energy efficiency as well as reduction in drinking water consumption. And there is another well, Mexico has been ranked as 12 in from the 25 countries evaluated by the International Energy Efficiency Scorecard by the American Council of Energy Efficiency Economy, and is one of the countries who has more improvement from the 2016 to the last evaluation. That's all. And this is the list of reference of the different actions that have been implemented in Mexico.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriela, and also for this focus on energy efficiency, including on the energy building code and so on. With that, we would like to move to Brazil. We have Clarice Degani, the coordinator at the Brazilian Council on Sustainable Construction. And she has quite some experience in environmental certification and performance sustainability in organizations and real estate projects. So comes a practitioner's perspective to this. So please, Clarice, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. First of all, it's important to say that the CBCS is a non-governmental institution for sustainable construction sector on Brazil. And we have a particular point of view by the scale of influence on the NDCs and on construction sector in general. Our target is mitigation plus resilience. And we start in building sectors, but we also think that's important to see these issues considering the buildings inside cities. We also consider the construction sites because cities are composed by a lot of numbers of sites in construction. And we have the infrastructures and also the civil construction materials industry. All of them contributes on heating, on green gas house emissions, and we see all of them in a transversal way, considering the NDCs chapters. And when we saw, for example, we have a Brazil Zero Carbon Report to 2060, and when we see all these squares, these graphics, we don't see in particular the building sector, how we can work for their targets. What's the scale of responsibility that construction sector has on these statistics? We think it's important to define the boundaries of construction sector or even the building sector. Its stakeholders, its scales, the life cycle phases and interface between other sectors. If we don't know how to set goals, how to measure the gains, so we think that's why it's difficult for our government to see the real impacts of construction sector in general and the NDCs that they are in.
To take on the questions.
The next slide, please. Some relevant aspects to the NDCs context in terms of emissions, waste, and resource depletion. We think that we start in projects, our actions on mitigation starts in project design, land use, and occupation, because they must provide, thinking about the emissions by transport, for example, the buildings, the integration buildings between different types of public transportation. The buildings have to support new modes for transportation, for example, shared parking lots, boarding and landing areas for apps, services, infrastructure for electric vehicles. Don't we think that our building project must do that to work on the mitigation, lowering emission. Feasibility of sorting, storage, and recovery of waste during the maintenance of buildings and also their connection with urban services also can contribute. And on construction side, we have wood use. Now we have some products. The CBCS have some products with in this matter. This one that we showed here is from our syndicate our organization that we have on civil construction, the constructors, a publication that works on waste of construction and demolition waste in Brazil. The same, what's the impact caused by the usage of wood in construction sites, to identify the potential for mitigation in this matter. Policies for public supply chain and waste management, also focusing on the formality of renewable resource inputs and their conservation, and also on renewable alternatives, agriculture, for example, for flooring, materials, and furniture. We can see on the reports, on NDC reports, please, yes, by demolition and construction waste on these reports. We didn't see them. And the emission caused by construction materials production. There are a few of them we see on the industry matters, but not all of them. Next slide, please. Some CBCS contribution. We have also some products, some publications, and some projects that we finished, that we've done. Aspects of sustainable buildings in Brazil and promotion of public. Sustainability frameworks on the residential sector. We have our Brazilian program on quality and productivity on building residentials. We have also mapping the actions of interest in water resource management with our National Agency of Water. We have done a sustainable social housing initiative with 3 publications where you can see all we've done about social housing initiative. We have done works with ISO standards and Brazilian standardization to do indicators for cities, sustainable cities and communities vocabulary, management system for sustainable development on cities, the guidance. These we translate in Portuguese, and we have also our ABNT, our Brazilian standardizations on these issues. And we are building together with a CE 2068 to developing sustainable communities. We are also working on water conservation in buildings and the usage of alternative non-potable water sources in buildings also. Next slide, please. And we take some of our projects, ongoing projects, that need support and partnerships towards NDCs and towards to be heard, to be heard. On energy efficiency issues, we think in Brazil we need effective incentive to our PBE, energy efficiency level process for buildings and equipments. We also need incentive energy efficiency simulations in project phase, in retrofit design, effectiveness in identifying the best energy efficient solutions. We need to reduce consumption and adopting alternative sources. We need in Brazil also to incentive energy audits as support for retrofit decisions in energy efficiency. We have done a publication. It is called Methodologies and Practices for Application of Energy Audit in Buildings. And we are also doing some projects for renewable sources of energy, clean energy grids, and diversity of the energy metrics. Particularly now, we have a national agreement to develop the benchmarks and energy performance indicators for non-residential buildings in use, private and public, aiming the development of an energy consumption database and a national management program for buildings in similar to the existing one that we have also for new construction. We have the Procel Edifica for new constructions on residential and also on non-residential. But now we are working on the benchmarks to do our label for non-residential buildings, but in use, existing buildings. Next slide, please. And here we will show you a little bit more about this project with the Eletrobras, our National Agency of Energy. We are doing works with 15 typologies because we want to know, to benchmark all of these 15. We are going to do 75 energy audits and plus than 1,000 simulations in energy efficiency to understand the behavior of these buildings and construct the benchmark equations to have our label, levels on our label. We are going to work on the description of these buildings, a general and macro analysis to collect data and calculate some indicators, and choose the buildings that are going to be audited. Then, on these audit buildings, we are going to analyze the consumption history, the electricity or other energy sources, the billing method, in-place renewable energy, identify the irregularities. And we are going to map monthly, annual consumption, sectorization, meter data, among other informations. And then we are going to build a usability profile by this energy audit. And at the end, we are going to have 15 benchmarking equations to understand where, for each one, how is the benchmarks that are going to fit. Next slide, please. Also, in other matters that we think that have issues for the climate change, we know that energy consumption on building sector goes beyond only its use by operation itself, because we also have to measure the energy consumption on construction sector, considering embedded energy of materials, the consumptions on productive processes of building materials, and also on the energy consumed on construction sites. We have done two products on this issue. One of them is about, we did a simplified LCA for fast and reliable environmental assessment of building materials. We have done that on bricks sector. We have also a platform on the internet on our website called the 6 Steps on Selecting Materials Construction. It's an online tool, and we have 2 ways to select the materials of construction. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And to finish our presentation, we think that's important to know that we also work on the city's scale, mitigation and resilience. It was an action that we've done last year with municipal governments to promote and support structuring actions to reduce in a long-term greenhouse gas emissions in public buildings throughout energy efficiency, rational use of water, distributed generation, and urban mobility. We have done that last year, and now, and that year, we have 130 municipalities registered from 21 states in Brazil. We have done 20 interviews that we have, and we did 3 pilots, 3 cities pilots, and the result of these studies and this, was told in this cidadeseficientes.ccs.org.br, a guide to the best practice for Brazilian municipalities using the data that we collect last year. And this year, in 2019, we are going to continue this program on cities. And that's thank you very much. That's all I have to present today.
Maybe with that, well, since we're already a little bit over time, as promised, we will make sure that the questions that you've posed to us in writing will be sent to the presenters and so we facilitate the exchange of the answers, and we'll see how we can maybe add a slide to the presentation for those who would like to see the outcomes of the webinar as well online later. So we'll facilitate that, and I think well, it was a very rich exchange of experiences. There is a lot going on, a lot of dedication. Some key themes across the region did come out very clearly, and I think that's very interesting as well. That will help us further inform the regional roadmap that is being developed. We will make sure that this feeds into that process as well. As mentioned at the outset, this webinar is one of a series, so we would like to invite you as well to join future ones. We don't only do them regionally specific, but also global. So I think there is more opportunity to exchange as we go along. With that, thank you very much to our presenters, and also to the active listeners and those who ask questions. And we will wish you a nice rest of the day, or a nice evening for those where it's already a bit later in the day. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.